Masechet Ketubot, Daf Tet Vav, and with the staff we conclude the first perek of Masechet Ketubot. We're going to be speaking a lot about probabilities, but don't worry, it won't get too mathematical. Amar Rabbi Yosef, Ma'aseh betinoket, sheyarda lemalot mayim min ha'ayin, v'ne'ensa. Rabbi Yosef says one time there was a story of a young girl who went to fill up her jug with water from the spring, and tragically she was raped. And now the question is, what is her status regarding marrying a Kohen? Well, it depends who the rapist was. Amar Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, Imrov anshe ha'ir masi'in lichuna, harezot tinaseh lichuna. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri said, we'll look at the majority of the people in the city. If the majority of the people in the city are of good lineage and can marry Kohen, proper to marry Kohanim, their daughters can marry Kohanim, then we assume that the rapist, although he was obviously an evil person, nevertheless was of proper lineage, and hopefully we catch him and gets appropriate punishment. But the thing we're focusing on now is this daughter. We can assume that the majority of the men are kosher, and therefore this daughter, this girl, can marry a Kohen. But if not, if most of the people in that city are halalim, or prohibited, or have other lineage problems, then she would not be able to marry a Kohen. All right, that's the Mishnah. Amar le Rava le Rav Nachman, Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri damar keman. And now let's analyze this ruling of Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. Rava asks Rav Nachman, who does he follow? Rabban Gamliel, Rabban Gamliel, in the previous Mishnah, if you remember, we're talking about a case of a woman who is with some man. And we want to find out if she is permitted to marry a Kohen, and if they have a child, what's the status of the child. Rabban Gamliel says, if she says that she was with a person of a kosher man, then we believe her. And even if the majority of the people around are unkosher, we trust her and she can marry. So according to the Rabban Gamliel, we should assume that this girl also is just fine, even if the majority is unkosher. So it can't be Rabban Gamliel. Rabbi Yoshua, on the other hand, ruled that even if the majority of the people are kosher, we do not trust her, and we assume that in the previous case of the previous Mishnah, that she was with someone who was unkosher. And so to here, even if the majority of the people in the city are kosher, we should still assume that the rapist was not kosher, and because maybe he's not. Okay, so now we have a problem. Who are we going to follow? And here's the answer. Amar lehachi, Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Rav. Rav Nachman answered Rav's question with a statement of Rav, who said, Bikronot shel sipori haya ma'aseh. Karon means a wagon. So it was in these caravan wagons in Sipori. The caravans would come and sell things in the marketplace. So there's a place where there's lots of visitors coming in and out from other cities, and that's where this incident happened. And we're going to follow Rabbi Ameh Damar Rabbi Ameh. And furthermore, we're assuming that it's only talking about a case where we know that the majority of these visitors, these merchants, are themselves kosher. Now, furthermore, we're going to add Rabbi Yanai's opinion. And Rabbi Yanai said that if one had bi'ah in the marketplace, then it's permitted to a Kohen. Adding that to the fact that it was the majority of the people in the marketplace were kosher. So now, how does this help? Still is just a majority. What we're going to see is that we're going to call this a double majority, because the residents of the city of Sipori are majority kosher, and the majority of these visiting merchants are also kosher. We call that a double majority. Now, I know statistically, mathematically, it's hard to figure out why this would make a difference. This is not like a majority of a majority where you'd say it was 75% true, but rather talking about two different populations. Nevertheless, intuitively, makes more sense that the more groups there are that are kosher, that's better than if it was only in the city and we're only counting the majority in the city. So here we're calling this a double majority, and therefore we're actually following Rabbi Yehoshua. Rabbi Yehoshua would say if there's only a single majority, like if there was no merchants around, just in the city, and single majority of people kosher, he says no good. But if you add yet another population with also a majority of kosher people, then that's fine. Okay. Now we are going to clarify. Hold on. Did this incident actually happen in the wagons, on the marketplaces, a crowded area? It doesn't really make sense that one would be able to rape a girl in that area. Anyway, it says she went to the spring. Now rather, it means at the time of the marketplace when these merchants are around. So if it's during that time, those people are around, that's when we have a double majority, and therefore she can marry a kohen. However, if there was only a single majority, for example, if someone from the city, even though the majority of the people in the city are kosher, he left and went out to the middle of the forest and found a girl there and had bi'ah with her, then we have to that this man is not kosher, as at least a 50-50 chance, and therefore that woman would not be able to marry a kohen. The point is that this is only a single majority because it didn't happen in the marketplace where there are lots of people from the city and merchants, so there you have a double majority. But here, when someone left only the town, so we know it's only from the town, so that is called a single majority. All right, so we answered that question. Now we're going to introduce another statement in this regard. To understand this statement, there's another rule we have to understand. One rule we just saw is that one majority is not good enough. Two majorities, that is good enough, even according to the Yehoshua. Second principle is that when something is moving around, then we're more likely to follow the majority than when something stays in place. We're going to see the case of the 10 stores in a second, right? So when something leaves its place, then we look at the majority and we follow the majority. However, when things are stationary and I go into one of the stores, in that case, we consider it 50-50. Again, why mathematically is this true is a good question, but just that's the intuition of the Talmud. Okay. Kiha dechi ata Rav Dimi amar Zeiri amar Rabbi Hanina v'amri la amar Zeiri amar Rabbi Hanina. So one time Rav Dimi came from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel. He said, or others say it just in his name, Holchin achar rov ha'ir ven holchin achar rov si'ah. We're going to follow the majority of the people in the city and not the majority of the people that are in the marketplace. And so now that's the statement. Now we want to understand this. What does it mean? Kilapelaya. If anything, it should be the opposite. The people that are in the merchants in the marketplace are people moving around, and we just said when people moving around, then we do follow the majority, and the majority of them are kosher, so that's good. Whereas the people that live in the city, those are stationary, and even though they are a majority kosher, when something is stationary, we consider it like 50-50. So if anything, it should be the opposite, that we should follow the majority of the marketplace and not the majority of the city. So we're going to fix the statement, and here's what he actually said. Ela holchin acharov ha'ir vehu di'ikarov si'ah behada. We follow the majority of the city if there is also a majority of the people, of the visitors passing through, which is exactly the answer we said earlier, that you need a double majority. And we do not follow if we have only a majority of kosher people either in the city or majority of people only in the marketplace. Even if the incident happened in the city or in the marketplace, that's not good enough. The reason is that technically, if it happened in the marketplace and the majority of the people in the marketplace are kosher, then it would be okay because they're moving around. And so that's the basic rule. Either double majority, or if they are moving, we'll also follow the majority. So really we should follow the majority if it happens in the marketplace, when the majority of the marketplace merchants are kosher. But we make a gezerah. If we permit when an incident happened in the marketplace, then we may come to permit when it happens in the city. And when it happens in the city, even though the majority of people in the city are kosher, but they are not moving around, and therefore that would not be good enough. So that's why we in the marketplace has two things going for it. All right. We concluded so far that we need both principles in play in order to permit this woman. Number one, that there is a double majority, and that the incident happens in a place where people are moving around. So therefore, if there's a majority both in the city and in the marketplace, and the bi'ah happens in the marketplace where people are moving around, then we apply both principles, and we assume that the assailant was kosher and she can marry a kohen. But we're going to test this out and ask. Verov ha'ir nameh. Even if the assailant is someone from the city, but let's say he leaves the city and goes out somewhere else and has bi'ah with this woman elsewhere. So then that's a case of something that leaves the majority, and in that case we assume it comes from the majority. And so here too you can have a double majority, majority in the marketplace, majority in the city, and even if it's the assailant is someone from the city, so he's still moving around because he left the city, and that is permitted. That's the question. Okay, this is on the just a few lines up. We had a case where someone left the city and we assumed it was prohibited. But that must be a case where we have only one majority, not the people in the marketplace also that are there, and a majority are kosher. Okay, so that's the question. And so we answer, indeed, you're right. If it was from someone who left the city and went somewhere else and was with a woman, we would assume that the woman is kosher. La sericha teka azla'i legabaihu dahava le kavua. We are dealing with a case where it has to be in the marketplace, not in the city, where she is the one that comes into the city, and therefore the people in the city, our residents there, are stable. And so in the city, we consider it a fixed place, and therefore we assume 50-50, and we have to be stringent. And that's a bizarre statement. Anything that's fixed in place, we assume it's equally balanced, and we don't follow the majority. Okay, now, further question. Is this true that we really need a double majority? I'm going to bring you a case here, a braita, famous braita, that does not require a double majority and still permits with one. How so? Or still follows one majority. How so? V'atanya, tesha chanuyot kulan mochrot besar shechuta, v'achad mocheret besar nevela. If we have 10 stores altogether, 9 of which are kosher, have slaughtered meat, and one of them is not kosher. And a person went into the store and was shopping, but maybe he was listening to a podcast about Daf Yomi while he was walking around and didn't realize which shop he went into. They all looked the same. And then he got home with just a shopping bag, no receipt, and he's not sure which of the stores he went into. So that in that case, if it called asur, we have to assume the meat is prohibited, because even though 9 of the stores are kosher, but he went into the stores, and that's called fixed. The stores are in fixed place, and therefore we consider it like 50-50, and you can't eat it. However, if you find a piece of meat, again unmarked, it's just wrapped in plastic, the same plastic that all the stores have, and you find it in the middle of the street, and there are 9 stores that it could have come from that are kosher, and only one that's not kosher. In that case, since it moved around, it came out of the places, therefore we do follow the majority. And here, there's only a single majority. We're not talking, there's no other stores, there's no caravan, there's nobody else bringing in meat from outside. And we follow one majority, and we permit, right? So why are you telling me that I need a double majority to permit a woman? Maybe you'll tell me, oh, maybe there is a double majority. Maybe we're talking about a case where the gates of the city are not locked. And in fact, there are people that are coming in and bringing meat with them, and they're selling it on the street. And therefore, and the majority of the people that are coming in have kosher meat, and therefore it is a double majority. We have a majority from outside also, and therefore it's a double majority. No, but you can't say that. But Abi Zera says even if the gates of the city are closed, and that's it. These are the only 10 butchers around. And nevertheless, we can follow one majority and permit the meat when it's found in the middle. And the answer is Ma'ala asu biyochasin. The rabbis wanted to have a higher standard regarding the laws of lineage. The laws of lineage are more significant, more impactful than the laws of kosher meat. And therefore, kosher meat just we want one majority, but it's particularly for lineage that we need this double majority. Okay, good. Now that we brought the cases of these laws of probability, we're going to analyze them further. Gufa. We quoted him already, but now we're adding to his statement. Ben the kula, ben the chumra. Rabbi Zera said that anything that's fixed in place, we don't follow the majority, but rather we consider it 50-50. And we do that both if it leads to a leniency and if it leads to a stringency. So what's the source of Rabbi Zera? What Braita would he get it from? Or Mishnah? Let's see. Mina le Rabbi Zera ha ilema mitesha chanuyot kulan mochrot besar shechuta ve'achat basar nevela. Maybe it's from the Braita that we just quoted. You have 10 stores, 9 are kosher, one's not kosher. Ve'lakach me'achat mehen, and he went in and bought from one of them. Ve'eno yodem ez elemen lakach sefeko asur. He goes in, so then he has to assume it's prohibited because he went in there. So that's called kavua. Would be asur. If you find it, then it's moving around, then you can follow the majority. So in this case, when it's in a fixed mode, when I go into the store, it's prohibited. Hatam lechumra. Okay, good. There I know that this rule applies for stringency, but I'm looking for a case where it applies even for leniency. Because here we said if you follow the stringency, then the meat is not kosher. But I want to find the opposite case. Ela mi tish'a tsefardeim v'sheres ehad benehem. But rather from this Baraita, if we have 9 frogs and 1 sheres, a frog, dead or alive, does not impart tum'ah. A frog is okay. Whereas a sheretz, 8 different sherasim, one of them is a toad. So you have to know the difference between a frog and a toad. Other ones are like mice. If a dead sheretz is there and one touches it, then that person is tameh. So we have 9 kosher animals and 1 that is not kosher, 1 sheretz. And someone touched one of them. He doesn't know which one he touched. I guess he also doesn't know the difference between a toad and a frog. Okay, sifeko tameh, we have to assume he's tameh. So here, these frogs are in place, and he touches one of them. And so, even though a majority are tahor, we have to assume he's tameh because they're in a fixed place. So this is not a good source, because hatam nameh lechumra, here also we're being stringent in not following the majority. We want a case where we don't follow the majority for leniency. How are we going to find that case? Oh, the opposite of what we just said. Ela mitisha sherasim usfardeh echad benehem. We have 9 dead toads and one dead frog. So the majority are not kosher. Touched one, doesn't know which one it was. So these are fixed in place. What's the law? If it happened in private property, and so we're not sure, we assume for stringency is tameh. If it happened in the public area, then we assume it's tahor. Now, what this distinction is a more general distinction that we see in other cases, where in public domain we're more lenient than we are in private. Seemingly, we learned this from Sotah, but seemingly the reasoning behind this is because in your private domain you can be more careful. In public domain, there's so many different things. If you're going to be stringent about everything that you touch or happens in public domain, then it would be impossible to ever be tahor. Okay, so in any case, if you know something is tameh, even though it's in public, then you'll be tameh. But if you have a doubt, 50-50 kind of doubt, then you can be lenient when it's in public. So let's see. In this case, we had 9 things that were not kosher. So if we follow the majority, then we should say it doesn't matter where you are, even in public, you are tameh, because 9 of them are shiratzim. But we don't say that. Instead, we treat this like a 50-50 because because they're sitting in place, and there's, even though there's 9 that are tameh, we treat it like 50-50. And when you have 50-50 safek in public, it's tahor. So there you go. Now the Bizera has a rabbinic source from this, Tanaitic source from this baraita. But we ask further, Medoraita minelan, does the Bizera have a biblical source for his ruling? Amar kedahi does, ve'adav lo ve'kam alav. This is pasuk in Devarim, talking about premeditated murder. Person is lying in wait for someone. He's hiding behind the bushes. He has a plan, and he's going to go and kill him, and he does. He gets capital punishment. So why say ve'adav lo? Why do you have to explain this? Why not just ve'adav? So ad kaven lo. So this Tanakama, who is consistent with Rabbi Shimon elsewhere, says it has to be that the murderer intended to kill this particular person. If he intends to kill Mr. Cohen, but then he misses. He shoots at Mr. Cohen, he misses, and he kills Mr. Levy by mistake. Then he does not get capital punishment, because even though it was premeditated, he wanted to murder someone, nevertheless he got the wrong victim, and so he doesn't, still not permitted, but he doesn't get capital punishment. Okay. That's a separate law that's not related to us. V'Rabbanan, the Rabbanan who disagree with Tanakama, how do they interpret this law? Amre deber biyanai perat lazorek even lego. We're talking about a case where someone takes a rock and throws it into a crowd, and so this is a deadly action. Probably very well may fall on someone's head and kill them. But it's a crowd, so there's no way he's intending for any specific person. That is a person that, in that case, that murderer does not get capital punishment. Okay, so that's what Rabbanan. Now let's see. Well, presumably, if he did intend for one specific person but got someone else, then he would get capital punishment. Here, he doesn't intend for anyone. Okay, so now what's exactly the case of Rabbanan? So what's the difference? If there's a crowd and he throws something in, then he's intending to kill someone in the crowd. Okay, so we have to assume it's a mixed crowd, and there are some Goyim and some Yisrael. Okay, side point, the law is that if someone kills a Yisrael, capital punishment. If someone murders a Goy, not capital punishment. Why is that moral? A side question we're not going to deal with now. But that's assuming that rule. So if there are 9 Goyim and only 1 Yisrael, then tepukle deruba Goyim ninhu. Then obviously the person would not get capital punishment because he's following the majority. The majority of the people that he threw the rock into, he would not get capital punishment for. So that's why he doesn't get capital punishment no matter who he kills. And even if it's 50-50, there's 5 non-Jews, 5 Jews, and he throws it in and kills someone, he's not going to get capital punishment because in his intent, safek is 50-50, and whenever it comes to capital punishment, we always try not to give someone capital punishment, and so we're going to go towards leniency. So rather, it must be talking about a case where there are 9 Jews and only 1 goy. But since they're all in one place, they're all sitting there, they're all stationary, and this killer guy is the one throwing the stone. And even though the majority are Yisrael, so therefore if you follow the majority, then you would give him capital punishment because his intention is to kill a crowd of mostly Jews. Or someone in the crowd of mostly Jews. So most likely it's going to be Jews, so he should get capital punishment. But But the Rabbanan say he does not. Why? It must be because since they're in place, we consider we don't follow the majority. We consider it like 50-50, and 50-50 in Dinei Nefashot is for leniency. And here we go, a biblical proof for this Timat of Rabbi Zera, that when something is fixed in place, we do not follow the majority, and this is both the Chumrah and Le Kula. Next, we have a statement about who the halacha follows. So remember, we're talking about going back to the Mishnah. We're talking about a case of this girl who was raped at the well, and we said that she is Rabbi Yosef brought this case and ruled that she can marry a kohen. We assumed that the assailant was Jewish. The Gemara so far said, why do we do that? Well, we assume a couple of things. Number one, majority of people in the city were kosher, and there was also merchants in town. The majority of them were kosher, so we have a double majority. And also, this happened in a place where people were moving around, so that we have that principle as well. Only there would we assume that the girl is kosher, otherwise not. Okay, that's what we said so far. Right now, we're going to forget that we said all that. Okay, this is kind of going back in time. And but that's going to come in a second. Itma Rav Chiya bar Ashe amar Rav halacha keRabbi Yosef veRav Hanan bar Rava amar Rav hora'at sha'a hayita. Two students both in the name of Rav. One says we follow halacha like Rabbi Yosef, and here we're not forget the two majority thing. Even if it's just one majority, forget the merchants and all that. We assume we follow the majority of the people in the city, and they're kosher. Therefore, the girl is kosher. Whereas the second opinion of Rav Hanan says that's not true. In the usual case where you have one majority and all that, which we really should prohibit. In that instance, it was a hora'at sha'ah, meaning a one-time only exception. Perhaps because we feel bad for this girl who was assaulted, and now she has to suffer further. She won't be able to marry a Kohen. So the rabbis made an exception for her, but otherwise it would not be so. All right. Now, Mativ Rav Yirmiyah, Rabbi Yirmiyah is going to ask a question out of Chiya, the first one. Are you telling me that don't you need, for cases of lineage, don't you need two majorities? And you don't have a double majority here, right? Again, we're forgetting everything we just said. V'hatenan, we're going to prove that you need a double majority now for your lineage. Masa ba tinok mushlach. If someone found an abandoned baby in the city, and they don't know if it's Jewish or not. Imrov goyim goy. If the majority of the people in that city are not Jewish, we can assume it's not Jewish. Imrov Yisrael. If the majority of people are Jewish, we can assume it's Jewish. Mesa mechsa. If it's exactly equal to the population, then Yisrael, we assume that this abandoned baby is Jewish. Now, for what purposes are we applying these assumptions? Rav said, when we follow the majority, that's only for the law of sustaining a person. Now, if the person's life is in danger, obviously you have to save them no matter what. But we're talking about the laws of taking care of the poor, that all in Vayikra, Veche achicha imach, this high level of taking care of the poor applies to Jews only. And therefore, Rav says that if the majority of people are Jewish, we assume the baby is Jewish, and we apply all those laws of keeping his level of living up to that Torah standard. But regarding lineage, no, we do not follow the majority, because only one majority, and you need a double majority in order to assume that the person is of kosher lineage and therefore Jewish and be able to marry Jews when they grows up. Okay, Shmuel Amad lefakech alav et hagal. Shmuel says that this law of the following majority applies to opening up, removing a heap of stones that falls on a person on Shabbat. Okay, another morally difficult law that if a building falls on people on Shabbat, if they are idolaters, then one cannot violate Shabbat to save them. Only if they're Jews, then one can violate Shabbat and remove the stones to save their lives. Okay, why should this be? Don't really want to get into this now, but one possibility is that actually the ancient law we know from the time of the Bet HaMikdash was that Shabbat is even more important than a life. Jewish life doesn't matter. You don't violate Shabbat even to save a life, even to defend yourself if an enemy comes. That was the original law, and therefore that would be across the board. Later on, the rabbi said, hey, you know what? It's true, Shabbat is more important, but if we save a Jewish life who will keep Shabbat in the future, then it's worth violating Shabbat once so that there will be future fulfillment of Shabbat many more times, and that argument would apply to a Jew and not to an idolater. All right, but in any case, Shmuel says that when we say we follow the majority, we're talking about saving their lives on Shabbat. Okay, in any case, the question is from Rav, because Rav clearly said that we follow a single majority for laws like sustaining, but for lineage, you need a double majority. So how could you say that we allow this girl to marry a Kohen based on a single majority? And the answer is, ishtamiteh ha damar Rav Yehuda amar Rav. Rav Yirmiyahu asked this question of how could you follow just a single majority? He overlooked the statement of Rav that we quoted all the way in the beginning of this sugya, who said Bikronot shel Sipori hava maaseh, that this incident happened in the marketplace where the wagons are in Sipori, and in fact there were merchants there, and the merchants were majority kosher, so therefore it's a double majority, and that's why it was permitted. So in fact you're right. This answers Rav Yirmiyahu's question. It was talking about a double majority. All right, fine. Well, if in fact it is a double majority, according to Rav, then how come Rav Chanan bar Ava says it was an exception? It was a one-time exception. Why? It was double majority. This can follow a regular rule. Ha man de matne hai ha lo matne ha. And the answer is that the one who said it's a double majority would not agree that it was a hora'at sha'ah, and the one who says hora'at sha'ah would say it was only a single majority. So in the end, we have two different ways of explaining this Mishnah. How come the rabbis in the Mishnah permitted that girl and assumed that the assailant was kosher? One is that there was a double majority, that's why, but that's only a very limited case. The other is that there was not a double majority, but they wanted to help out this poor girl, and therefore they made an exception to the rule for her. Okay, Gufa, Masa Batinok Mushlach. Im Rov Goyim Goy, Im Rov Yisrael Yisrael, Mechsa Yisrael. Now that we quoted this source, let's analyze it further. We find this abandoned child, and we follow the majority. The majority is idolaters. It's idolatry. We could translate. And goy means just non-Jews, but you can translate idolaters if we follow the Meiri, who says that these laws that distinguish Jews and non-Jews apply in those days when the non-Jews were idolatrous and not under moral rules, but does not apply in a society where everyone follows basic rules of morality and have basic faith and so on. So the Meiri is very important in solving these difficult cases. So based on that, we can translate idolater. And if the majority is Jews, then the baby we assume is Jew. If it's exactly half, we assume the baby is Jewish. And Rav said, this is only for the laws about sustaining poor kid. But for lineage, then that we would not follow just a majority. It's not enough that the majority is Jewish. You still can't let him marry. And Shmuel says this is talking about we follow the majority to save the person's life on Shabbat. And now we ask, wait a second, does Shmuel really say that if the majority of the people in the city are idolaters, then we don't save whoever is under there? but maybe the person under there is Jewish. There's still a 49% chance that the person is Jewish. You're going to let them die? Rav Shmuel said, when it comes to saving a life, we do not follow majority, even if there's a 0.1% chance that you can save that person's life, and a 1% chance that the person is Jewish, then you do violate Shabbat. So you don't follow majority. Ella ki itmad Shmuel aresha itmad im rov goyim goy. Amar Shmuel l'fakech alav tagal eno ken. Rather, Shmuel was not talking about the end of the Braita, but rather the first statement of it. When we said if the majority is Jewish, we assume that the kid is Jewish, and the Shmuel said, yeah, that's true for other laws, but for saving a life, if the majority, the first statement says, if the majority is idolaters, we assume that this kid is an idolater. Yeah, that's true for other laws, Shmuel would say, but regarding saving his life on Shabbat, then we would save the kid's life no matter what. Even if the majority is not Jewish, we still have some chance that the baby is Jewish, and therefore we would violate Shabbat to save it. Good. Im rov goyim goy lemay hilcheta. So now, in what cases would we apply this statement that if most of the city is idolaters, we ruling that they're in idolatry? What halacha does that apply to? Amar papa lachilo nevelot. It means to feed him non-kosher food, right? You have this baby, we have to take care of him. What are we going to feed him? If the majority of the city is not Jewish, we can assume the kid is not Jewish and therefore allowed to eat non-kosher food. And if the majority of the city is Jewish, we assume the kid is Jewish. What does that apply to? For returning lost property. And again, the basic law is that one must return lost property to a Jew, but not to an idolater. And again, the laws here would apply differently today when we're not talking about idolaters. But back then, the idea is that if this kid lost something, then if the majority of the city is Jewish, then we would return be obligated to return the object to him. Mechsa al mechsa. If the city is exactly half, then we assume the kid is Jewish. Lemay cheta. To what law does that apply? Amar Shakish lin zakin. It applies to laws of damages. Hechi damis. So what are we talking about? Okay, a little introduction to laws of damages regarding oxen. If this is the halacha, and the rabbis know that this is an unfair, imbalanced halacha. There's a whole story about that the Romans one time came and checked out the law and said, hey, this is a double standard. Okay, so this is again another morally difficult law, but here's the law. If a ox of a non-Jew gores ox of a Jew, then he has to pay full amount. Non-Jew has to pay full amount. The other way around, if the ox of a Jew gores that of a non-Jew, he pays zero in the Jewish court. It says, it's not my fault, the ox did it. So that is a double standard. The Gemara says so and knows it. If it's a Jew, a Jewish ox gores another ox of a Jew, if it's a short tam, he pays half. That's the background. So now, if the city is half, and we assume that we apply the law for Jews to this kid. Now, what case are we talking about? If it's one of ours, an ox of a Jew gores an ox of a non-Jew, then lemale aitere ayad Israel at ushkol. So then, technically, since it's one of our oxen, the person who perpetrated should have to pay full. But we have another principle, the hamosim echavero alav hare'aya. If you want to extract money, you have to prove so that the person is Jewish. So therefore, the perpetrator who has to pay can tell the one who was a victim, say, hey, prove that you are Jewish, and then you'll take it. So even if the city is half, in which case, for some law we assume it's Jewish, it wouldn't be this law, because that would go against the one who was gored is this kid, and the Jew does not have to pay him unless he can prove that he is Jewish. If he's not Jewish, he pays nothing. So it can't be talking about that. La sericha de nagche Torah dideh le Torah didan. Rather, it must be that this kid's ox gored a ox of a Jew. This is the case where I need Resh Lakish's ruling, because without it, here's what I would have assumed. If that kid is not Jewish and his ox gored that of a Jew, then he has to pay full amount. If he's Jewish and shortam, then he has to pay half. So we would have reasoned as follows: Palga mishalem idach palga. So half of it he has to pay, because no matter what, he's going to pay at least half. But the other half, amar lehu, that kid who's unknown can tell the victim, you prove that I'm not Jewish, and I owe you the other half. And they'll give it to you. But if you can't prove it, then so we would have thought that in the case of half-half, if we treated him as a safek, then he wouldn't pay. And so Resh Lakish answers, this is the case we're talking about, where even though the city is half-half, we assume that he is in fact Jewish, and therefore he pays half, and he pays half only. This is important for him to teach, because if I assume that half-half is like a non-Jew, then we might have made him pay the full amount as a non-Jew. So that's like the Shakish's chidush here, is that we don't treat him like a non-Jew, but rather he can apply, and therefore his law would be the same as a Jew, and he only has to pay half. Hadran alach betula niset chazakim uberuchim.